Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to D.G. Wells Books in La Jolla, California. Tonight, we're honored that Cappy McGarr, Emmy-nominated producer, will discuss his acclaimed new book, The Man Who Made Mark Twain Famous. Stories from the Kennedy Center, the White House, and other comedy venues. Cappy McGarr is an Emmy-nominated co-creator and executive producer of the Kennedy Center Mark Twain Prize for American Humor and the Library of Congress Gershwin Prize for Popular Song. He has also served as an executive producer of 7 White House musical performances honoring music legends including Stevie Wonder, Sir Paul McCartney, and Carole King. His writing has been published in the New York Times, Politico, and USA Today. In his new book, he reveals how the Mark Twain Prize was conceived and shares his take on the Kennedy Center's tributes to Richard Pryor, Jonathan Winters, Carl Reiner, Whoopi Goldberg, Bob Newhart, Lily Tomlin, Lorne Michaels of Saturday Night Live, Steve Martin, Neil Simon, Billy Crystal, George Carlin, Tina Fey, Will Ferrell, Ellen DeGeneres, Carol Burnett, Jay Leno, Eddie Murphy, Bill Murray, David Letterman, and others. Cappy also gives the inside scoop on several shows he produced from the East Room of the White House, including the Gershwin Prize for Popular Song. Plus, he tells tales from his involvement in national politics, including encounters with President Lyndon B. Johnson, Senate Majority Leader Tom Daschle, Governor Ann Richard, President George W. Bush, President Barack Obama, and many others. The renowned film historian Ken Burns has said of this book, reading Cappy's book is not unlike sitting down to dinner with him and listening to the stories he has picked up from decades of rubbing elbows with political leaders and comedians alike. There are laughs and howls and chuckles and chortles. Ken Burns. Ladies and gentlemen, Cappy McGarr.
Thank you. Thank you, Dennis. It's a real honor to be here. You know, this bookstore is unique, not only in La Jolla, but also in the country. Amazon's taking over the world, as we know. Who doesn't get an Amazon package every day? But Dennis, you don't. I'm going to send you an Amazon package.
I ordered these from Amazon.
I won't tell anybody. Anyway, it really is an honor. Dennis is really a one-of-a-kind and nice and generous and supports authors, and it's just an honor for me to be here. To start with Ken Burns, he's a longtime friend of mine. I helped start his board, and I asked him to write the foreword, and he did. And that piece that Dennis met, or read, rather. Hold on one second. I'm going to get to it. He says, Cappy name drops, picks the names back up, and then shamelessly drops them again, which I think is very, what a really nice friend. By the way, my internist is here in the back, so if anybody has any problems or something, In my preamble, I go, and I'm going to read this because we are at a book reading, right? When I tell people that I'm writing a book about my life and the Mark Twain Prize for American Humor, there's one question I get more than any other. Do you have any other book recommendations? The second question is usually, why? Not too long ago, a rabbi friend of mine shared some wisdom from the Talmud. To lead a full life, a man must plant a tree, have a child, and write a book. Having metaphorically planted trees in finance and having raised my children, I was inspired by his quote to complete the set and thereby led a Talmudically full life. So I dug deep in my memories, and I've conjured up stories from throughout my life, from my formative days at the University of Texas to Goldman Sachs, to building lifelong relationships and friendships with national politicians, to getting appointed to the board of the Kennedy Center by 2 different presidents, to the creation and the execution of the Mark Twain Prize. I've met a ton of wonderful people, and I'm going to tell you about them all right here. Still, it's a careful balance. I've read books about self-important business figures, and they come across like an excuse to list off celebrities they've met. Terrible. And fund a couple Lamborghinis. I have no intention of doing that. Sure, I could brag about the relationships I've developed over the years with political titans such as Lloyd Benson, Tom Daschle, Al Gore, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, but that would be gauche. And I could regale you about all the times I've rubbed elbows in entertainment stars like the likes of Tina Fey, Bill Murray, Eddie Murphy, Mel Brooks, Aretha Franklin, Paul McCartney, but I would hate to name drop. Plus, I would feel remiss if I bought a luxury vehicle this day and age and didn't go American, so no Lamborghinis. But in all seriousness, I realize any memoir requires some delusion of grandeur from its author. But at least I can, the best I can, I've tried not to make this book about me, instead of about the value humor can bring to politics and life in general. The way differences can be bridged by a funny story or a silly impression. There's a joy when a comedian makes a politician laugh and vice versa. The way I see it in Washington, there aren't enough funny people and too many jokes. I'll do my damnedest to bring lighthearted, humorous approach to my family and to Washington. That's why the Mark Twain Prize is so important. It's an annual reprieve in the nation's capital from the severity of the news, a chance to celebrate people who keep our spirits up in the face of challenges. Boy, do we need it today. And an opportunity to remind our leaders not to take themselves too seriously. The journey to make the Mark Twain Prize happen has been quite a ride, and it comes with some fair share of surprises. None more shocking than when that same rabbi friend called me and sheepishly admitted that he discovered that the quote he had shared with me wasn't from the Talmud at all. It was shemuggin, which is Yiddish for malarkey, which is Biden for bullshit. But it was too late. I'd already starting to write my book, and if that isn't funny, I don't know what is. So this book very nicely was forwarded by Ken Burns, and the cover was done by a great artist named Mark Erlichson, who's done over 50 New Yorker magazine covers, and he's a friend of mine in the San Francisco area. So I was very fortunate to have those two people. I was talking with my publicist. He said, yeah, I don't care how good the book is, you've got Ken Burns and Mark Erlichson. I went, thanks a lot for the encouragement. So I'd like to tell you a couple of stories. One, the Mark Twain Prize, is about honoring people who make us laugh and bring joy in our lives. And we stop once a year and do it, and it's important. And the year Eddie Murphy got the award, I took him in the Oval Office, and I started the tradition under Bill Clinton. And the first recipient of the Mark Twain Prize was Richard Pryor, and he was very ill at the time. He had terrible MS, and he was in a wheelchair, so I did not take him to the Oval Office. The second year was Carl Reiner, and I'll tell the story about that in a second. But I took Eddie Murphy into the Oval Office, and Eddie and the President Obama are there, and he says, Eddie, you have no gray hair, and we're the same age, and it's what's up? So Eddie says, well, Mr. President, you have a very difficult job, and you've got a very stressful job, and so all I do is make people laugh. And so the President looked at me and he goes, Cappy, I'm funny, aren't I? Yes, Mr. President, you are funny. He said, and I've got good timing, don't I? I went, you have got the best timing of anybody we know. So we then go into the Situation Room and see all these young kids literally monitoring the entire world. But the afternoon came around, about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I take Eddie and his family, his mother, and Janie and my wife and my daughter, Catherine, were also with us, and took him on a tour of the White House. And, not bragging, but I've been to the White House many times, and I've had a lot of tours at the White House, and so I took Eddie on his special tour of the White House. And so he's standing in front of the Ronald Reagan portrait. This is, by the way, right before the Hillary Clinton Trump election in November. This is in October. So I'm standing behind him, he's looking at the Ronald Reagan portrait, and I go, well, Eddie, welcome to the White House. Mommy and I are glad to have you here, just don't rearrange the furniture. He turns around, he goes, that's a really good Reagan. He said, do you do any more? And I said, well, I'll do Carter. He said, well, Carter was one of my very first impressions, so he does a perfect Carter and a lot better than mine. He goes, let me hear your Carter. I go, well, the White House is a great example for Habitat for Humanity. He goes, well, that's pretty good. Do you do any more? I said, well, I'll do Clinton. He said, well, let me hear you, Clinton. I said, well, I hope Hillary wins. I'll be interviewing interns 2 at a time, if you know what I mean. So he gives me a huge hug, and we bond. And so the next night, I'm emceeing the cast dinner that as I do every year at the Smithsonian. And Dave Chappelle, I've introduced Dave Chappelle and Trevor Noah. Janie's dinner partner was Trevor Noah that night, and a bunch of other great, funny people. And so at the end of all the toast and the roast, I said, Eddie, come on up. We've got a little gift for you, which is a Mark Twain book, first edition, Dennis. And we give all of our Mark Twain recipients, so future Mark Twain recipients, if you're listening to this, you're going to get a first edition Mark Twain book. So he comes up and he goes, I said, Eddie, come on up, we got a little gift for you. So he jumps on stage, this picture right here actually, right there. He points to me, he says, Cappy is really funny, does great impressions. Cappy, I'm going to go down to my table and call me back up as Ronald Reagan. I went, I don't think that's a good idea. I mean, I practiced for a month or more. I do have really good writers, and I'm trying, comedy is everything and timing is everything, and I've been practicing, and Janie's sick of hearing me, all the practicing. So Eddie goes, this is a VIP crowd. We've got congressmen and senators, and it's a Kennedy Center VIP crowd. So I'm there, and I said, well, Eddie, Mommy and I, when we traded places in the White House, just like you did in that movie, come on up, we got a little gift for you, which everybody went crazy. And I'm not going to, because we're being filmed, I won't tell you what Trevor Noah told me afterwards, because we don't have a way to bleep it. But in any event, it's great fun to see these and see behind the scenes these incredible, really funny people. A lot of poignant stories in the book. Carl Reiner was our second recipient, and his brother was dying of cancer. His name is Charlie, and so we're in the cabinet room before going in the Oval Office. President Clinton was president, and Janie's there. Jerry Seinfeld, his pregnant wife, is there. Rob Reiner's there. Mary Tyler Moore's there. Dick Van Dyke's there, and all the wives. And so the White House Social Secretary comes to me and says, Cappy, you go in first. The president's going to know, obviously, a lot of the famous people. He knows everybody that's on the list. By the way, I think President Clinton does have a photographic memory. And so I want you to be there to introduce the president with everyone, just to make it easier for him and also expedite everybody meeting the president. I said, sure. So Carl said, look, Charlie is not doing great, and he may lose a lot of energy, the time, and so can we push him into the Oval Office first? And he said, fine. So Charlie takes the oxygen out of his nose. Carl pushes him in the Oval Office. I said, Mr. President, this is Charlie, and he pushes me away, and he said, Cappy, you don't have to introduce me to Charlie Reiner. I know who he is. Clinton gets on his knees and holds Charlie's hands, both of his hands, and he said, Charlie, I've had a lot of important people in this office, but not near as important as you. He said, you were on the first wave of Normandy Beach. And he goes on and talks about 8 different things and courage and bravery that Charlie Reiner had. I'm crying, Carl's crying, Charlie's crying, and only is Clinton. And Clinton goes on. He's just really incredible. So then we get all of our pictures made, and then the Mark Twain Prize is a bronze statue that the Mark Twain Prize House, by the way, has given us permission to use. And it's pretty heavy. And so we're sitting there for the final photo ops. I'm sitting to the right of the president, Carl's on the left. So I give the prize, the Mark Twain Prize, to the president, and he looks at it and he goes, gosh, I wish Mark Twain was alive. He said, Ulysses S. Grant was president. He called Twain in his office and said, I want you to write my memoir. I'm broke, I have no money, I'm dying of throat cancer, and I want my family to have some money. And so Twain says, no, sir, I'm not going to do that, but I'll tell you what you do. You write your memoir longhand, and I will come edit it. It became a bestseller, by the way, and his family was well taken care of. And so Clinton looks down at the statue, or the bronze, and he goes, sure wish Mark Twain was alive. I'm going to take his advice, though. I'm going to write my memoir by longhand. So when his memoir did come out, the New York Times said the 2 greatest presidential memoirs in history are Ulysses S. Grant and Bill Clinton. And so that was a really wonderful moment in the Oval Office. You know, Bill Murray. Bill Murray famously does not have an agent. He doesn't have a publicist. He's got a lawyer who you can send a letter to, but you'll never hear from him. But he's got an 800 number, so you just call the 800 number and say, hey, Bill, would like for you to be in a movie, or hey, Bill, would like for you to do this, or whatever. And so the president of the Kennedy Center sent his lawyer a letter saying, Bill, will you take the Mark Twain Prize? You certainly deserve it. Nothing. We don't hear anything from him. So about a month later, the president called me and said, Cappy, you need to move on. I said, no, Bill Murray. We need to honor Bill Murray. He's brilliant. I said, give me a week. She said, okay. So I had a friend of mine, Craig Johnson, who went to Stanford. Actually, if you go to the tennis locker room at Stanford. But anyway, Craig's a big tennis star, and but he plays golf with Bill Murray at the AT&T Pro-Am at Pebble Beach. So I texted Craig. I said, how do I get in touch with Bill Murray? I would like to take the Mark Twain Prize. And so he texted me back. He said, send me one sentence, no more than two. I said, okay. I said, Bill, will you take the Kennedy Center Mark Twain Prize, Cappy? About 5 minutes later, Craig has copied and pasted, and Bill says, okay, I guess so. That's how Bill Murray accepted the Mark Twain Prize. So fast forward, we're now in Washington. I'm meeting Bill at the lobby of the Four Seasons because I'm taking over to the White House to meet President Obama. And his new golf gear had just come out that week. So William Murray golf shirts and whatever. So he goes up to his room and he's changing clothes and he's got this Cub jacket on. And he says, I'm in a coat and tie because we're going to the Oval Office. And he goes, do I need a coat and tie? I said, you're Bill Murray. You can wear whatever you want to wear. He said, well, do you think I should wear the Cub jacket? And I said, well, the president, is a White Sox fan, hates the Cubs, but sure, why don't you wear your Cub jacket? And the Cubs at that moment, that was the year that they won the World Series. And so they were not in the World Series, but they were in the playoffs. And so we go to the Oval Office. Bill comes in, President Obama goes, you gotta be kidding me. You're wearing a Cubs uniform. I'm a White Sox fan. He goes, I know, and you're not in the World Series, and we are. And the White House had called me about 2 weeks before then and said they would like Bill Murray to do an Affordable Health Care Act PSA, public service announcement. I said, fine. So I asked Bill if he'd do that. He goes, yes, but I don't want a script. I want to ad lib. I said, perfect. So Bill and I are in the cabinet room, and the young kid, he's got to be 30, very young. He comes in, he says, Mr. Murray, so nice to meet you. I'm such a big fan of yours, and here's the script for the Affordable Health Care Act. So Bill looks at me and goes, Cappy, I told you we're ad-libbing. I said, yeah, tell the president we're ad-libbing. And I told the White House before this, but we're ad-libbing. He said, okay. So he runs out, he runs back in, he says, the president's okay with that. And I said, oh, good, I knew he would be. So we get to the Oval Office and we do the White House, we do the Mark Twain photo ops, and we have really fun and funny conversations. So then we get to the Affordable Health Care Act, and they've got cameras there. And so the president says, hey, why don't we do a putting contest? And Bill says, okay. So he said $1 a hole. Fine. And now it's obviously about the Affordable Health Care Act, right? So the president puts down a paper cup, and Bill says, I'm not putting it in the paper cup. He said, the president says, why? He said, well, it doesn't ding when you put it in. He said, okay. So he yells out, does anybody have a glass cup here in the White House? And so they finally bring a glass cup in the White House, and the president putts first. He misses. Bill puts in every single ball. The president doesn't get any in. And the president didn't do it on purpose because he's very competitive. In the meantime, Bill is starting to limp around. And the president says, you okay? He said, no, my hip and my knee. And he said, I'd really need to see a doctor or something like that. He said, well, do you have health insurance? He goes, well, well, how you doing? He said, well, I don't have health insurance. He said, well, you can sign up for health, the Affordable Health Care Act. He said, really? He said, and will that take care of it? He said, yeah, it's a great way to get insurance. He said, well, does it cover mental conditions? And the president says, it does. It does. He said, oh, well, that's really good. So we're walking out of the Oval Office. The president turns to me, and this is Will and I play golf together, so he knows how terrible I am at golf. So the president turns to me and said, do you play golf? I said, well, yes, Mr. President, I do. He said, well, when you bet at golf, if you lose, you got to pay up. I said, I know, and you lost $5. And so he turns to his aide and he said, hey, do you have $5? I owe Bill $5. So I wanted to take it. I said, Mr. President, can I take a picture? He said, of course not. In any event, that was then the president gave me his putter, and Bill had his putter, and Bill and I putted on the Eisenhower green, which is a picture up there as well. We have somebody here from South Dakota. I'll tell a quick Tom Daschle story. I met Tom, Lloyd Benson, who was a senator from Texas, introduced me to him, and right before he was running for Senate, he was a congressman in South Dakota, and he obviously won that race. So that's when I first met him. Jane and I did a small fundraiser for him. And Tom Daschle is not only one of my closest friends, but also one of the greatest public servants I've ever met. And I've met a lot of them, but he's just one of the first class guys that you'll ever meet. In any event, we're doing a fundraiser for him in Fort Worth in 1992. So he's been in the Senate for a while. He's up for re-election, Tom is. And so I earned my way through school by doing voices and impressions, and I had a radio program. So I called Rita Lewis, as a friend of ours, and Chip Barkley, my close friend, knows Rita very well. And I said, Rita was his top fundraiser. And I said, Rita, I got my Ross Perot impression down. She said, well, let me hear it. This country's in serious trouble. And he goes, okay. I said, let's call Tom and, tell Tom that Ross Perot's on the line, and I'll just play a practical joke on him. So we call over there. Nancy Erickson is his gatekeeper. Rita says, tell the senator, majority leader, that Ross Perot's on the line. Tom gets on the phone, one of the nicest people in the world. Ross, how you doing? Now, Tom, I don't want to be president, but the people want me, I will run. He said, well, you're talking to all these issues that are so important, Ross. Tom, the real reason I like you is that you're short, just like I am. And he goes, which Rita is now starting to snort, laughing. And so now I'm waiting for Tom to say, who is this? But he doesn't. He goes, Ross, you're really funny. Let me tell you a joke. Well, at that time, Tom's a lot better at it now, but Tom can't tell a joke. So I said, he's in the middle of this joke. I said, Tom. He goes, yes, Ross, I'm here. I said, Tom, Cappy. He goes, and now Rita's in a full snort. Who else is on the phone? I said, Rita Lewis, and she made me do it. And she said, I did not, which is true. I made it, asked to do this. And so Tom says, oh my God, I hope this is not roll call. Tom really realized that it was an incredible practical joke, and so he started using it, breaking the ice on fundraisers. He did win re-election, and so after he won, during that whole campaign, we had an event where we would walk up hike up the front of Mount Rushmore, and in South Dakota, obviously. And so the head of the National Park Service was there. So we're going up there, and this aide of Tom's, Jeff Franson is his name, say, hey, Jeff, take a picture of me. I'm going to get on top of George Washington's head. He goes, oh, okay. So I get on top of George Washington's head, and I'm like this, and he's taking so many pictures. And the head of the Park Service goes, sir, get down from there. You're committing a felony. So, I'm getting down there, and of course, Tom comes over and says, oh, God, leave it to Cappy. Of course, he'd be the one to get arrested on Mount Rushmore. In fact, is in the picture right up here, because the only friend I've ever had who nearly got arrested on Mount Rushmore. And so the Park Service guy is just screaming at me, sir, do you realize we have some Japanese tourists down there, and they're looking up at Mount Rushmore, and they're seeing some fool on the top of Mount Rushmore, George Washington's head with his hands out like Jesus Christ. I went, I am so sorry, sir. That will never happen again. I'll never be invited back to South Dakota. So we have the picture, and in the book, the caption is, Senator Daschle, Cappy McGarr, Lincoln out of frame. So, thank you. There's so many different stories I could tell. Mel Brooks is one of the great stories. I don't know how many of y'all know Blazing Saddles. It's one of my favorite movies. And Mel Brooks, I had dinner with him, And he said he could not make Blazing Saddles today, which I think is a bunch of BS. It's one of the greatest pictures about prejudice. Basically he just takes his fist and just punches the nose of bigots. But there is, I'm not going to tell you what it is because once again we're being filmed, but it's something called the number 6, and it's trying to get the people out of Rock Ridge. And Harvey Korman is the Attorney General and wants to own all the land in Rock Ridge to get this, get all the people out. And so I'm now having dinner with Mel Brooks. He's turned us down 3 or 4 times for the Twain. We had Carl Reiner ask him, he's 95 by the way, his book's out. Mel, if you're listening to this, read it, please take the Mark Twain Prize. Anyway, I'm sitting we're in the green room having dinner, and in his contract, Mel said he wanted egg salad sandwiches that were huge, like almost a pyramid. It was at the Kennedy Center, thank you. It was at the Kennedy Center. The Kennedy Center had paid Mel Brooks to show Blazing Saddles, and it would talk about Blazing Saddles for 90 minutes. And so the president of the Kennedy Center called and said, would you like to have dinner with Mel Brooks? I said, sure, well, it'll be in the green room. I said, great. And so David Rubenstein, the chairman, we all were there, the 4 of us. And in his contract, as I was saying, that he had egg salad sandwiches, a bag of Lay's potato chips, real Lay's, and a bag of Oreo cookies, and real Coke. Now, he's 95 years old. That must be a great diet. So we should, doctor, my internist, does that work? Anyway, I said, Mel, we've asked you 3 or 4 times to take the Mark Twain Prize. I know. I said, we should do the music of Mel Brooks. I'm so tired. Springtime for Hitler. Just high anxiety. I mean, there's so many great songs. He goes, well, that's interesting. We could do that. And I said, look, if you turn us down, I'm going to have to do a number 6 on you. Well, if you'll Google it later. But he laughed so loud, he spit egg salad sandwich all over me, which I haven't washed that suit ever. But so Mel still is not had the Mark Twain Prize, and there's only one other person that took the Mark Twain Prize, turned us down 3 times because he thought it was too vulgar, because Richard Pryor, when we honored him, Chris Rock had said the N-word and the F-word, and so he said, I don't want to take the Mark Twain Prize because I think it's too vulgar. That person was Bill Cosby. And so we finally offered it to him well before any of this other stuff came out about him, and he did accept it. But he was the only person that we've honored that was rude to staff, talked down to the production staff people, and was just really not a nice person. And then when his trial was over and he was found guilty, we rescinded the Kennedy Center honors, and also we also rescinded the Mark Twain Prize. Just about that first deal, because Mark Twain Prize was almost dead. Jean Kennedy Smith, John Kennedy's sister, was ambassador to Ireland. She was on the board of the Kennedy Center, and we had a board meeting on that first Richard Pryor show. And so the night before was the show, the Mark Twain Prize, and the next morning was the executive committee and also the board meeting. And so Jean Kennedy Smith flew over from Ireland to to see the show and whatnot. And Harry Belafonte, Whoopi Goldberg, Gene Wilder all stood up and said how wonderful Richard Pryor was and how it was important that he get the first Mark Twain, that Mark Twain would have been so proud and pleased that in his name, Richard Pryor was getting the honor in his name. Everybody did. Chris Rock had just come out of Saturday Night Live. He gets up on stage. He said, I've heard all this MFBS all night. He said, it makes me sick. He said, all this, Mark Twain would have been so happy about Richard Pryor. He would have said, say in, take my MF bag upstairs right now. Laughter broke out on the concert hall at the Kennedy Center because it was very, very funny, except Jane and I were behind the row of board members, and I didn't see their faces, but I heard about it the next morning. So Jim Johnson, the chairman, says, Cappy, we had a wonderful, he said, give us a report. And I said, well, we lost $100,000 our first trip out, but this could be a really great thing. We got more young people in, and there's a couple of, later became very close personal friends of mine that kind of talked against it. But Jean Kennedy Smith was silent. She didn't say anything. And so Jim said, let's vote. If because we lost money, we need to vote on, or we're going to do this again. So everybody voted yes, and one vote was no, and that was Gene Kennedy Smith. And so we're now going to the board meeting that morning after the executive committee, and Jim Johnson says, I'm so sorry, Cappy, the Mark Twain Prize is dead. I said, what are you talking about? I said, well, Gene Kennedy Smith voted against it. I said, yeah, we got one vote. She said, she's the president's sister. If she's against it, it's not going to happen. So I made a beeline to Ms. Kennedy, and I said, Ambassador, I said, I know you voted against it, but I don't know why. But, I worked really hard on this, and I'd really appreciate, you reconsidering your vote. She said, my brother would have been horrified with the N word and the F word said on the stage bearing his name. I said, well, I could not agree with you more. But your brother stood for great humor, wit, charm, and he would have been very happy, I think, with the laughter erupted on the stage bearing his name. I said, you just need to give me another chance. We'll honor a lot of people, and I named off a lot of other people. And she said, well, let me think about it. So she, in fact, did change her vote, went up to Jim Johnson, and Jim said, Cappy, give us a report, unanimously approved it on the executive committee. So it had a very rocky start. It now makes $2.5 million. It grosses $2.5 million for the Kennedy Center every year. So from losing $100,000 that first year to being a cornerstone of the Kennedy Center it's really a wonderful thing. And there's so many people like that made this a success. There's 4 other creators that wouldn't have happened with my good friend and Chip Barkley's good friend, Will Riss, who was head of the American Airlines office in Washington, because we need to fly in all the talent. And Will, to this day, American Airlines flies all of the talent in for the Mark Twain Prize. Wouldn't have happened without Linda Daschle, Tom Daschle's wife, was representing American and introduced me to Will. Wouldn't have happened without Larry Wilker, who was the president of the Kennedy Center, who greenlit the whole idea of the Mark Twain Prize. It would not have happened without Murray Horowitz and Mark Krantz and John Schreiber, who went to the White House and wanted to do a comedy show, but the White House Social Secretary said, we're not too funny over here. I think it was a Monica Lewinsky scandal, and so we're not going to do that. We're not going to have a comedy show at the White House. And so Ann Stock, went to the Kennedy Center right after that, and who was the White House Social Secretary and was head of institutional relations. And Ann Stock, brought the idea of the Mark Twain Prize to the Kennedy Center. So a lot of people, like a success has many fathers and mothers, and the Mark Twain Prize is all of that. So, any questions?
I have a question.
Yes, Dennis.
When you and Carol Burnett were at the Folger Library, did she ask you to yodel, or did you ask her to yodel? And would you give us a sample?
So we honored Carol Burnett, and it's at the Shakespeare Library. It looks like something out of Harry Potter. There's big balconies on each side. It's all dark wood. And my dinner partner was Tina Fey. So I get up there and I said, Carol, congratulations. She had won the Kennedy Center honors, and so we're very happy that we're honoring you with the Mark Twain Prize. And I said, Carol got her start, like many young aspiring actresses, on a mattress. A huge laugh. And Carol knew what my joke was, and she's let me get the laugh, which I was very appreciative of. And then after I got my laugh, she says, only once? That got a huge laugh. I said, yes, Carol got her first Tony nomination, Once Upon a Mattress on Broadway. And so I get back down to the table, and Tina Fey goes, a mattress joke, Cappy, very solid. And I think Janie said, please don't encourage him. His ego will not take it. So I get back up there, and I said, Carol, I don't like to brag, but, I know you yodeled, you did your Tarzan yodel, but I also can yodel. She said, and I said, I will yodel if you yodel. Well, I mean, I didn't expect her to yodel, but she, huge yodel in this Harry Potter Shakespeare library, just the sound yodeling off the thing. And so then I really had to do it. Janie said, please don't do this, by the way, when I got up to, say that part of the asking her to yodel. So I went, okay, that's it.
Holy cow.
I did, for my 50th birthday, a friend of mine, my college roommate, Bob Kaminsky, said, do you have any regrets? I said, I do. I hadn't recorded my country album. He goes, well, what's the name of it? I said, Pure Vanity. He said, you've already got a name for your album? I said, yeah. He said, well, okay. So the next day he calls, he said, listen, I've got 10 guys, friends of yours, that are going to give you the birthday present, and you're going to record your Pure Vanity. So I went in, recorded 8 country songs. And as I told you, Ken Burns is a friend of mine, and he's staying with Janie and me in Dallas. This is probably about 10 years ago. And we're having dinner. Ken doesn't drink, and he's also has a photographic memory. And I do drink, and I'm not sure I have a photographic memory, and I've got a doctor here to verify that. So I said, you haven't done at dinner, I said, Ken, you haven't done the music of America. He said, yes, I have. I've done jazz. I said, Ken, no, I'm talking about the music of America. He said, what are you talking about? I said, country music. And he goes, interesting. I said, well, you start with Jimmy Rogers, you do the Carter Family, you do Hank Williams, and then you end with Willie Nelson and Waylon Jennings. Dreaming My Dream album is I think one of the greatest country albums in history. Or you wouldn't have Garth Brooks. And he said, well, that's interesting. So I'm cooking breakfast for him the next morning. He comes down, he says, we're doing country music. Because the guy that writes a lot of my stuff, wrote a lot of my films, he said the same thing you did. Start with Jimmy Rogers and going all the way through. And so it came out, he was very, very cordial and very nice, and gave me a huge national exposure in terms of giving him the idea. Somebody said, how'd you come up with the idea for country music? It was really kind of outside the genre of what Ken generally does. And so Steve Case, the founder of AOL, is another friend of mine. The index is called the Name Drop Directory. Okay? So Steve Case writes Ken an email. He said, please, and it was in the Rolling Stones magazine. I mean, he really Ken went crazy about giving me credit for it. He said, Ken, please stop giving Cappy credit for country music or he'll become insufferable. And I emailed back and I went, too late, I already am. Anyway, any questions? Well, Mark Twain, all of Mark Twain was about social justice, by the way, in my opinion, but he's also our first stand-up comedian. He lost all of his money. He invested all of his money in this printing press, type press, and I don't know, Dennis, I don't know what you call it, but it was some sort of newfangled type printing press. And he lost everything. And so in order to make money, in order to eat, he would go throughout America in these theaters, small theaters, and tell stories. And obviously he had lost all the money when he wrote Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer. And so he really spoke truth to power. And that's really what comedy is about, speaking truth to power. The last honoree we did was Dave Chappelle. I actually wrote an op-ed in the USA Today about it, about his Netflix special, The Closer, which the headline of my op-ed was, leave Chappelle alone, let's lift up trans people. But it's ridiculous to blame Dave Chappelle. Go back to Lenny Bruce. Lenny Bruce went to jail many, many times. George Carlin went to the Supreme Court. And all that happened to Dave Chappelle is he was trending on Twitter. I mean, it really was ridiculous. And so to kick the evening off, I asked Tiffany Haddish, who's I think one of the funniest new comedians around. And so she gets up on stage and I give her a very funny introduction, as you can imagine. And so, like any Southern gentleman, I kiss her on the cheek. And I'm standing behind the stage and she goes, "That's the first time I've been kissed by a white man all year." And she looks at me and I'm turning beet red and I'm laughing. She said, "You're my little tomato. Don't die on me. Your wife's over there. She's going to be mad at me, but she's ready. You're my new boyfriend." I mean, going on and on. Anyway, she's very funny. And I still laugh the entire time. Anyway, so Morgan Freeman was last because he's not only one of the greatest actors of our time, but also he's Morgan Freeman, Academy Award winner, etc. So he gets up and I think he forgets who he's honoring. And so I got this great picture in the book, and I don't talk about this in the book, by the way. So I whispered to him, "It's Dave Chappelle." He goes, "Thank you." And so then he says, "We're here to honor Dave Chappelle." And I went, "Oh my God," I said, "Cappy, that routine you did with Morgan was so funny." Yeah, it really was. Anyway, any more questions?
Cappy, I have a
Yes.
more serious question
Yes.
after the yodeling question.
Yes.
As much as the current Senate is attempting to pass a federal voting rights law, can you tell us something about the role of the unidentified aide who participated at the LBJ Library and on that symposium on civil rights, and identify that unidentified aide?
President Johnson, I'm on the board of the LBJ Foundation. I've been on the board of the LBJ Foundation for over 20 years, maybe 25 years. But I just was really curious about Lyndon Johnson. I admired him greatly in spite of Vietnam. And so Walt Rostow was one of his national security advisors, and his wife was a very prominent teacher at the University of Texas. And I took a class from her and went to her and said, I'd like to take a tutorial on Lyndon Johnson. She said, fine. So I read probably 20, 30 books or whatever about Lyndon Johnson, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so I get this call, and I kept asking. I said, do you want me to write a paper? What do you want me to do for, this 3 hour to, hours I'm getting on this Lyndon Johnson tutorial? She said, I'll think about it. So I get this call from Johnson's chief of staff. Bill Wright was his name. Said, Harry Middleton wants to meet with you. Harry Middleton was the director of the LBJ Library at the time. They were having an LBJ symposium on civil rights. In fact, it was a month before he died, his last public appearance. Dennis has got the picture right there. And it was sleeting in Austin, just an incredible mess. And everybody had to fly into San Antonio at the Air Force Base there and drive buses in. Johnson wanted to land his helicopter on top of the LBJ Library, but that was not going to happen because it was sleeting, and they literally had inches of ice on the ground. And I remember so vividly in the green room with Mrs. Johnson and Johnson's his doctor, and the ladybird's on the phone with the president saying, people understand, you can't come, you're not feeling well, and he was having angina issues as well. The doctor said, Leonard, you just can't come, everybody understands. Well, everybody in the civil rights movement was there. Hubert Humphrey, Andrew Young, just on and on and on. Earl Warren, the former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, gave the keynote the last day. Johnson literally had the Secret Service put chains on his tires, and he literally drove himself in to the OBJ Library. So I'm sitting there, and I'd met him one time before, just briefly when he had his book out, but just passing by. So Johnson comes. He's 6'2" or whatever he is. He's a big man, and he goes, "Cappy, I understand you're my aide," which meant, "Go get me coffee, go get me my speech." And it was a thrill. And he goes, "Go get my speech. Liz Carpenter, who has worked for the Johnsons, has my speech upstairs. I want them on 3x5 cards." I said, 8x10 cards or whatever it is, but cards. I said, "Yes, sir." So I went up to the 8th floor of the OBJ Library, found Liz Carpenter. I said, "Miss Carpenter, the president's here. I need all the cards." She said, "Well, I don't have them on cards. Here's they were on 8x11 paper." And I said, "Well, the president wants them on cards." "We don't have them." Okay, so I go down. I said, "Mr. President," he said, "I thought I told you 3x, cards." I said, "Well, Liz Carpenter says I'm just talking 1,000 miles a minute, and I am just panicked." He goes, "Did she give you any trouble?" I said, before I could answer, he goes, "Young man, don't let Liz Carpenter ever give you any trouble." And he just burst out laughing, and I thought I was going to have a heart attack. So the last day of the symposium, President Johnson's on obviously the end seat, Lady Bird's beside him, and I'm on the other side of the Lady Bird. We're listening to Earl Warren. And this UPI photographer takes his picture, and it was in every paper pretty much in the country. And I think it was the Houston Chronicle that said, "President Johnson, Mrs. Johnson, and unidentified aide." I'm still mad about that. Lucy Johnson and Linda Robb Johnson think that's really funny. And by the way, unfortunately died in January, about a month later. And Bill Wright, right after the day after the symposium, he said, "Listen, the president's ordered a gift for you and wants you to, wants to give you something." And I said, "Well, that's very nice." He said, "Well, can you come tomorrow morning?" I said, "Well, Bill, I'm driving back to Dallas, and for the Christmas holidays, I'll drive back down, but my car's packed up." He goes, "No, don't worry about it. Just when you get back in January, just come on down and the president would like to, shake your hand, have coffee or whatever." And I said, "Well, that's very nice." Got back in January, president dies. I don't really even think anything of it, and just always curious about what that might have been, what that president was. And I didn't ask Bill about it at all. Mrs. Johnson got appointed the Board of Regents at the University of Texas, and I got elected vice president of student body, and her secretary calls me and says, "Ms. Johnson would like to have lunch with you." And I said, "Fine." Well, the issue of the day was student fees. She always pretty much always sided with students. And so I did all my research, and I had a binder, and I took my binder up, and I'm ready to talk about student fees. And Ms. Johnson, are we talking about student fees? She said, no. Cappy, the president, I found out that, you were our aide in the Civil Rights Symposium, and the president ordered this UPI photograph, and I'd like to give it to you. And so she gave it to me and signed it, which is, one of my treasured possessions. But Johnson is being revisited. In fact, as Ken Burns, after he did the Vietnam War, I said, it's a shame that you had to ignore all of Johnson's Great Societies. We're still talking about the Great Society today, whether it be Medicare, Medicaid. He started PBS. He started in the NEA. He started the NEH. He started so many clean water that Nixon basically also created the EPA, but President Johnson created that agency that became the EPA under Nixon. But the Great Society had over 1,000 pieces of legislation, and it was really more legislation that had passed since Franklin Roosevelt. But anyway, I am the unidentified aide. All right, thank you all for being here. Dennis, thank you again. Appreciate it. Very nice.
First thing I'm going to ask you is to sign that photo of the unidentified agent.
Sure.
Thank you, Cappy. I'm going to hang that up.